Please comment where you are watching in the world. I was hoping to tie him down and let me dominate his every cell. Well, that's what I had hoped. You can tell a lot about a man by how he looks at you across a bar table. Some stare like they're trying to memorize your face. Some look like they're solving a riddle you haven't even spoken yet. And some, rare ones, watch you with equal parts interest and restraint, like they're waiting for you to surprise them before they commit to being impressed. That was Sam. A little too handsome for someone that down to earth. Tall, with dark hair that flopped perfectly out of place, and a voice that made even small talk sound like foreplay. We met on Tinder. His profile said, "Loves conversation, weird movies, and good trouble." We matched on a Wednesday. He messaged me that night. "You've got the kind of smile that makes people confess things." I replied, "Then you better be careful." He said, "I'm not afraid of confession. Or consequence." That got my attention. By Saturday, we were sitting across from each other at a bar in downtown Charleston. I wore black. He wore navy and an easy grin. The conversation was fluid. Music, books, weird childhood stories. He asked what I did for work, and I told him I design very specific living spaces. "What kind of specific?" he asked. "Let's just say private clients. Private needs." He leaned in. "That sounds like a story." "Maybe it is." We had 2 drinks each. He offered to pay. I let him. When I asked if he wanted to see my place, he didn't hesitate. I lived in a bungalow a few blocks away. Cozy from the outside. Lights warm, plants in corners, records stacked neatly near a vintage turntable. Everything in its place. People always said it looked like a Pinterest board. Which was the point. Sam walked in and smiled. "You've got taste." "I cure it intentionally," I said. We sat on the couch, close enough to feel each other's breath. The first kiss was slow. His hands were gentle. He was patient, but clearly interested. When I pulled back and said, "I want to show you something," he nodded like a kid offered a secret passage. I led him down the hallway to a black painted door at the end. He paused. "What's in there?" "You'll see." I opened it and stepped aside. He walked in and stopped. The room was dim, lit by low red bulbs. The walls were matte black. There was a St. Andrew's cross, a padded bench, leather cuffs hanging neatly from wall hooks, a full set of implements gleaming on a shelf, floggers, collars, blindfolds, ropes. Each piece carefully cleaned, arranged, and stored. Sam didn't step further in. He stood just inside the threshold, shoulders slightly tense. "Whoa," he said. I watched him. "Still curious?" Yeah. This is serious. You actually use all this?" "Only with people who consent. Respectfully. Safely." He looked around again. "I've read about this stuff. I thought I was into kink. But this is a lot more real than I expected." I walked slowly toward the bench, tracing my fingers along its edge. "It is real. That's the point." He didn't respond. I turned back to him. "You said you were open." "I thought I was." "You can say no," I said gently. "This isn't a test." He let out a breath. "What would happen if I said yes?" "I'd start by tying your wrists. Soft rope, nothing harsh. I'd ask you what you're okay with, what you're not. We'd talk about limits. Safe words. Breath. I'd make sure you felt safe and still completely out of control. That's the balance. That's the beauty." He was quiet for a few seconds, then shook his head. "I don't think I'm ready for this." "That's okay. I thought I could be that guy. You know, the one who's into the edgy stuff. But this feels like I'm in someone else's movie." I smiled. "Then it's good you realized that before the first scene." He looked a little embarrassed. "You're not mad?" "Not even close." He nodded. "Can I head out?" "Of course." I walked him back to the front door. He grabbed his keys and paused like he wanted to say something. Then stopped. "Thanks for being honest," I said. He gave a half smile. "Thanks for not tying me up anyway." We both laughed, and he left. I locked the door behind him. Then I went back to the room, turned off the red lights, and sat on the bench in the quiet. I wasn't upset, just disappointed. My name is Maya. I'm 27, and I live in Richmond, Virginia. I'm a graphic designer by trade and a cautious optimist at heart. This story starts the way a lot of things do now, with Tinder. It was early spring. I'd been single for a while and decided to give dating apps another try. Nothing serious, just conversation, maybe a date if something clicked. I wasn't in a rush. I'd learned the hard way that rushing gets you nowhere good. That's when I matched with Jake. He messaged first. "You've got the kind of smile that should come with a warning label." I responded with a polite laugh emoji. It wasn't my favorite line, but it wasn't offensive either. We started talking. At first, it was light, music, movies, what we did for work. He said he worked in HVAC repair in Pittsburgh and loved road trips. That he could drive for hours with no destination, just music and the open road. I told him I liked that idea in theory. He joked, maybe I'll drive down to Richmond and take you on one. I smiled at the message, but I didn't reply right away. Over the next few days, we chatted sporadically. He was charming but intense. He'd send long messages, layered with compliments and questions. He asked about my family, my childhood, my biggest fear. He said things like, I feel like I already know you. And, do you believe people can be connected before they ever meet? I didn't know how to answer that. I started responding less. Not because he'd done anything overtly wrong, but because something felt off. Like he was trying to leapfrog over the normal pace of getting to know someone. He noticed. After a day of silence, he messaged, Did I say something wrong? I replied, No, just busy. Work's been hectic. He said, I'd drive 6 hours just to see you smile. I didn't reply. That was a Thursday. Saturday morning, I woke up to 3 texts. Jake. Hey, guess where I am, winky face. Jake. Just got into Richmond. Took the night drive. Couldn't stop thinking about you. Jake. I'm at Lamplighter Coffee if you want to finally say hi in person. My stomach dropped. I hadn't given him my address. I hadn't invited him. I hadn't even confirmed I wanted to meet. He'd driven 6 hours. For someone he'd never met. I didn't respond. I needed time to think, to breathe. 2 hours later, he sent another message. Jake, it's cool. I get it. You're probably nervous. I'll wait a while. Then, Jake, did I misread this? You seemed into it. Into me. Then, Jake, you're not even going to acknowledge I came all this way? Wow. I didn't know what to do. I'd never dealt with someone like this before. It wasn't a threat, exactly, but it didn't feel safe either. I told a friend, Lena. She said, block him. That's insane. He crossed a huge boundary. I agreed, but I didn't block him yet. Some part of me was still trying to be polite, to not escalate. Around 4:30 p.m., I got another message. Jake, I drove 6 hours for you, Maya. I'm not some creep. I'm a good guy. You said you liked road trips. You said you liked me. I hadn't said that. I told him, finally. You should have asked before coming here. That wasn't okay. I never agreed to meet. He replied instantly. Jake, I took a chance. That's what people do when they care. Jake, you're cold. You led me on. Jake, you women act like you want something real, then push it away the moment it gets close. I blocked him, but I couldn't stop shaking. I looked out my window 3 times that night, half expecting to see a car idling across the street. For the next few days, I kept my blinds closed. I parked a few blocks away when I went to the gym. I told my coworkers just in case. A week later, I got an Instagram follow request from a new account. No profile picture, no posts. The username was Jake6hours. Blocked. Then a message on Facebook. From a different name, but the same writing style. You ghosted me. I don't deserve that. I reported it. I never heard from him again after that. I met Jacek on a Thursday night when I was 3 cocktails deep and feeling a little too hopeful for my own good. I almost swiped left, but there was one picture that made me laugh. A grocery store selfie with a pineapple and sunglasses and a dumb caption. Just trying to pick out the best produce me. It was stupid, but it made me smile. And that was enough to entice me to reach out. Our first couple of conversations were surprisingly normal. He had a dry sense of humor and admitted that he hated most gym bros, even though he technically was one. Said he worked as a personal trainer, had his own clients, and occasionally posted fitness content, but wasn't trying to be one of those influencers. I liked that he didn't immediately ask for my Snapchat or use the word vibe as a verb. We messaged for about 2 weeks before we met in person. He wasn't pushy, which I appreciated. When we finally did meet, it was for a hike at Black Base Lake just outside Eureka Springs, his idea. Afterwards, we grabbed smoothies at a little place downtown. He talked about routines, cheat days, and how he hated rest days more than leg days. I'm not a fitness nut by any means, but he didn't make me feel bad about ordering a slice of banana bread or skipping cardio. He just seemed focused, like being healthy was his hobby, not his religion. After the third date, he invited me to his place for what he called meal prep night, and I figured, why not? Things were going well, and I was curious to see how he lived. I was half expecting his apartment to look like a frat house with protein powder spilled on every surface, but it was shockingly clean. Minimalist. Everything labeled. His fridge had clear containers aligned like a Tetris field, and there was a whiteboard on the wall that said things like, "No 0 days. Grind excuses. You're either building or decaying." I teased him about it, but he just laughed and said, "It keeps me focused." After dinner, he asked if I wanted to hang out in the living room. I thought we'd maybe watch a movie or just chill, but he opened his laptop instead and placed it on the coffee table. "I want to show you something kind of insane," he said with this little smirk that made me think it was a meme or a viral video. I leaned over, expecting a laugh. What he showed me instead was a black and white forum with a basic layout. No branding, no ads, just rows and rows of posts. Most of the usernames were cryptic, and the titles read like bizarre journal entries. First Tinder round 6.1. Date number 3, red flag on arrival, low value confirmed. I asked him what it was. "It's a private community," he said. "Guys post about their dates. Share notes. It's like a feedback loop." "I don't get it," I said. He clicked on a post. It was a photo, blurry, taken from across a restaurant. The woman was mid-laugh, clearly unaware she was being photographed. Underneath was a breakdown. Age approximate, 28. Outfit, casual chic, borderline trying too hard. Body language, open touchy. Interests, basic, books, dogs, travel. Value, 5.3. The comments were worse. A mix of mockery and cold analysis, like these men were reviewing a product instead of a person. I sat back. "Is this a joke?" Jacek shook his head. "It helps us avoid wasting time." "You wrote this?" I asked, my voice sharper than I expected. He didn't answer directly. Just scrolled down to a post under the username IronLogic87. The post was from a week before we met in person. He'd written about a woman he matched with. The description matched me so specifically, right down to the nail polish color I'd been wearing on our first date, that I felt my stomach twist. "She thinks she's hotter than she is," he'd written. "Probably a 6.2, but acts like an 8. Might be worth 3 dates max." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. "You're rating people? Like their value?" He shrugged. "Everyone does it. We just put numbers to it." "You gave me a 6.2, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. He chuckled. "Hey, that's above average." I stood up. "You're joking." "I'm not trying to insult you," he said. "It's not personal. It's just data." "Jesus. It's like Yelp," he continued. "People rate restaurants, movies, albums. Why not dates? It helps filter out the noise." "What noise?" "False value signals. Makeup. Filters. Personality inflation." I grabbed my bag. "Look, I thought you'd get it," he said, standing too. "You seem smart. Like you'd understand the bigger picture." I didn't answer. I just walked out. He texted me later that night. Said he was disappointed that I couldn't see the logic in it. That emotions cloud judgment. And he thought I was above that. I didn't reply. A week later, he unmatched me. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop wondering if every man I'd ever dated had done the same thing, just less overtly. Had they mentally tallied my attractiveness, calculated how much effort I was worth, and decided whether I was wife material or a time filler? It made me rethink everything. Every time I'd laughed at a joke I didn't find funny. Every time I wore something tighter than I wanted to. Every time I tried to seem chill, even when I was annoyed. Was someone evaluating me for that? Was someone giving me a number? I told a friend about it. She said she'd heard rumors about groups like that, but assumed it was just internet paranoia. "It's not," I said. "It's real." She didn't ask how I knew. She didn't want to. I deleted his number, blocked his profile, but the damage was done. I couldn't unsee it. I don't usually go out on dinner dates with strangers. Coffee? Sure. A drink? Maybe. But dinner? That's a commitment. A couple hours minimum, and if it goes badly, you're stuck in it until the check comes. But Mira made a convincing case. Her Tinder profile was like a curated gallery. One photo showed her in a courtroom, standing confidently behind a lectern. Another was her laughing on a boat with the sun behind her, hair perfectly tousled. The third was at a gala, wearing this deep green dress that shimmered even in the photo. She looked like someone who didn't just attend events, she dominated them. She messaged me first, which I won't lie, hit my ego just right. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just said, let's do dinner. Somewhere decent. I'll pick. I was bored that week and curious, so I said yes. She picked a place I'd never heard of, La Vigna, tucked into the north end of Sandpoint. It had this sleek, almost Scandinavian interior, the kind of restaurant where the waiter refills your water after every sip and the menu has more French words than English. I got there early. Mira arrived 10 minutes late, breezing in like she owned the damn town. She wore a white blazer over a silky blouse and tailored pants that made my entire wardrobe feel like an afterthought. She was beautiful, yes, but it was the way she carried herself that stood out, like she was always in control of the room, even if she didn't ask for it. We sat. The waiter brought water. She didn't even look at the menu before ordering the most expensive cocktail. I still hadn't figured out if I was impressed or intimidated. She started with small talk, but it didn't stay small for long. "What do you do?" she asked. "I work in media," I said. "Not front-facing, mostly behind the scenes. Content strategy." She nodded. "How stable is that?" "Stable enough," I said, keeping it light. "Own or rent?" "Rent." "What kind of car do you drive?" That one made me laugh. "You interviewing me for a job or a date?" She smiled, not embarrassed in the slightest. You can tell a lot by how someone answers those questions. I don't think I've ever felt more simultaneously intrigued and uncomfortable. She told me she had just made partner at her firm. The youngest in the firm's history, she added casually. She said she didn't have time for games or for men who weren't on her level. She wasn't trying to sound insulting, at least I don't think she was, but the way she said it made it sound like a fact, not an opinion. "I used to date for potential," she said, sipping her drink. "Now I date for proof." That line stuck with me. I asked what she meant. "Potential is a gamble," she said. "I don't have time to build someone up. I need someone who's already established." "Define established," I said. "$250,000 a year minimum." I nearly choked on my drink. She said it like she was talking about the weather. "Working out for you?" I asked. She smiled. "I've been proposed to 3 times in the last 2 years." I didn't know whether to be impressed or horrified. Then came the real kicker. "I've learned how to get what I want," she said, leaning in. "If I want a ring, I say I'm ready to settle down, move to the suburbs, raise kids. I let them believe it. Then I see what they do. And if they propose, I decide if I want them after I get the ring." I sat there stunned. "One guy gave me a $15,000 ring," she continued. "I sold it and used it as a down payment on a rental property." She said it like she was talking about getting a great deal on a sofa. She wasn't done. "I vet people before I meet them," she said. "Property records, LinkedIn, court databases." "You're joking," I said. "Nope. If someone doesn't own property or isn't incorporated in something, I unmatch." She once unmatched someone because his Instagram was too casual. Another because she found out he used an Android. "No ambition," she'd said. The waiter came back and she ordered the most expensive entree. Didn't even blink. Later, when the check came, she didn't pretend to reach for her wallet. She just leaned back, smiling like she'd already decided she'd never pay on a first date. "If a man's not willing to invest up front," she said, "he's not worth my time." I paid. Not because I wanted to impress her, but because I wanted to end the night without drama. She gave me a brief hug outside. "Let me know if you want to do this again," she said. "Sure," I said, knowing I never would. The next morning she messaged me. "Had fun last night, smiley face." I didn't reply. I unmatched her. A few days later, her profile popped back up under suggested accounts on Instagram. New dress, new quote in her bio, build different. Don't apply if you're basic. I didn't click. It wasn't worth it. She was smart, no doubt. Confident, beautiful, driven. But something about the way she talked about people, about relationships, made my skin crawl. I wasn't expecting anything real when I matched with Anwar. I'd been on a dating app streak, half out of boredom, half out of some desperate attempt to prove to myself that decent people still existed. But I'd grown numb to the endless selfies, shirtless mirror pics, and bios that said things like fluent in sarcasm or professional overthinker. We started conversing that night. He replied consistently, never made me wait hours. He wasn't flirty in the cheesy way most guys were. Instead, he asked about my work, my dog, my favorite music. He told me he ran his own contracting business, had been divorced for almost 2 years, and shared custody of his kids. He talked about them often. His son, obsessed with dinosaurs. His daughter, who wore a princess dress to daycare for 3 straight months. He told me stories about bedtime routines, picky eating phases, and the time he had to watch a cartoon movie 10 times in one weekend. I liked that he wasn't trying too hard. He didn't love bomb me. He didn't call me babe on day 2. It just felt easy. After 2 weeks of messaging, he asked if I wanted to meet. I said yes. We met at a taco bar in Marfa, one I'd been to a few times with friends. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet, with string lights and the kind of music that made it easy to talk. Anwar was taller than I expected. Better looking too. Not in a model way, but in a calm, settled kind of way. The kind of person who doesn't need to perform. We talked for 2 hours. About everything. He was easy to be around. Easy to like. When he walked me to my car, I remember thinking, he feels safe. We kept seeing each other. Always low-key. Walks in the desert trails around town. Coffee at the corner shop. Sometimes we'd just sit in his truck, parked near the outskirts, talking about nothing and everything. He never stayed out late. Always left by 9. Said he had early mornings with work or the kids. That made sense. I respected his boundaries. I wasn't trying to rush anything either. He never invited me to his place. Said he didn't bring women around his kids unless it was serious. Again, I appreciated that. It felt like he was thinking long-term. A few things stood out in hindsight. One time, when we were riding around in his truck, I saw a baby bottle in the side pocket. He said his daughter still liked warm milk before bed. That stuck with me, but I didn't question it. Another time, I called him at 7:45 one evening, just to say hi. It went straight to voicemail. Not even a ring. He texted the next morning saying his phone had died. Little things. Not huge. Just things you brush off when you don't want to ruin something. Then came the brunch. It was a Sunday. I'd gone out with a friend to this little cafe in town. We ordered pancakes and lattes. I snapped a picture of my food for my Instagram story, tagged the cafe, and didn't think twice. An hour later, I got a message from Yara, a girl I hadn't talked to since college. Her message read, "Hey, this is random, but I think you're dating my friend's husband. Is that Anwar in the reflection behind you in your story?" I stared at her text, confused. I opened my story, zoomed in, and there he was, blurry but unmistakable, sitting in the background, alone, looking down at his phone. My stomach dropped. I replied immediately, "What do you mean, husband?" He told me he was divorced. She replied with a link to a woman's Instagram profile. I clicked. There she was. Beautiful. Clearly pregnant. Her bio, mama of 2. Baby number 3 coming soon. Married to my best friend Anwar. Photos everywhere. Her holding her belly. Him smiling beside her. One from just 10 days ago. The caption read, "Can't wait to be a family of 5. I thought I was going to throw up. I texted him, "Who's the woman counting down the days to be a family of 5 with you?" No response. An hour later, I texted again. "You lied to me. You're not divorced." Still nothing. I called. Straight to voicemail. The next morning, when I tried again, I got a message that the number was no longer in service. He was gone. His Tinder profile? Deleted. Messages? Gone. Like he never existed. I couldn't stop looking at her Instagram. She kept posting like everything was normal. Smiling. Glowing. Proud. I wrote a message to her. Told her everything. But I didn't send it. She was too close to having a baby. I couldn't be the one to break her world apart. Maybe that was cowardly. I don't know. I felt used. I wasn't a fling. We talked about the future. We made plans. He met my dog. He told me about his daughter learning to ride a bike. Was any of it true? I still think about him sometimes. Not because I miss him, but because I still can't wrap my head around how normal he seemed. He wasn't flashy. He didn't love bomb. He didn't seem like a liar. He seemed good. And that's what scares me the most. Sometimes I walk by the taco place where we had our first date. I haven't gone back in. Every time I pass it, I think about his stories. About his son collecting rocks. About bedtime routines and dinosaur toys. I wonder if those kids are real. If they know their dad is the reason I don't trust anyone anymore. If they know he lives 2 lives. My name is Anna. I'm 25, and I live in a small town just outside of Boulder, Colorado. I've always considered myself a careful person. I trust slowly. I observe before I speak. I don't take risks unless I've measured the angles. But even careful people make mistakes. It started with good old Tinder, like so many of these unfortunate stories, so share on Reddit do. I matched with a man named Travis. He looked normal. Clean cut. Dark hair, green eyes, a little scruff. Buff. Handsome. Yummy. We matched on a Thursday. He messaged me that same evening. "You have kind eyes." That's rare these days. I responded politely. Thanked him. We started talking. Nothing deep, just surface level stuff. He said he lived in Denver. Worked in IT. No kids, no pets, no drama. He asked for my Instagram. I hesitated but shared it. I had a public account, nothing revealing, just pictures of hikes, my cat, and the occasional selfie. He started liking everything. Not just the recent stuff, all of it. Even photos from 2 years ago. That made me uncomfortable. Then he sent a message. "You looked so peaceful in that photo under the tree. I can picture myself there with you, just holding your hand." It was a picture from 2020. I didn't respond right away. He followed up. "Too much?" I replied, "A little. Just being honest." He said, "Good. Honesty's sexy." I stopped replying after that. Something felt off. He wasn't aggressive yet, but he was pressing in too quickly for someone I didn't know. By Saturday, he was still messaging. "Thinking about you. Then, wish I could see that smile in person. Then, I'd drive to Boulder right now if I thought you'd open the door." I didn't answer. I muted the conversation. That night, I was staying at my best friend Mia's house. Her parents were out of town, and we were having a girls' night, wine, bad movies, face masks. I told her about Travis and showed her the messages. She frowned. "He gives me bad vibes." I agreed. I was planning to block him the next day. We went to sleep around 1 a.m. I took the guest room upstairs, the one with the tiny window that overlooks the backyard. I woke up around 3:30, disoriented. Something was off. At first, I thought it was a dream, but then I saw it. A figure, standing by the fence, not moving. At first, I thought it was a shadow or a trick of the night. Then it tilted its head, and I saw the mask. It was white, featureless, like the ones you'd see in theater or on a mannequin. I froze. My entire body locked up. The figure stood there another 10 seconds, then moved slowly, deliberately, toward the house. I grabbed my phone and whispered into it, calling Mia. She answered on the second ring. "There's someone in the backyard," I said. "He's wearing a mask." She screamed from her room. I heard her bolt down the hallway. Then I heard something else. The back door. It creaked. Mia's dad had left it unlocked. I ran out of the room and met Mia in the hallway. She was pale, shaking. We both ran to her parents' bedroom and locked the door. She called her dad. I called 911. Mia's dad answered. He lives about 15 minutes away, and he was already in the car before we finished explaining. The dispatcher kept us on the line, told us to stay put. Then we heard it. Something creaking downstairs. Footsteps. Mia whispered, "What if he has a weapon?" I didn't answer. I was too busy staring at the door, waiting for the knob to turn. But then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. A noise outside. A scuffle. Then a loud thud. And shouting. We waited. Frozen. A minute later, we heard a voice, familiar and furious. Mia's dad. He'd gotten there before the cops, and he'd tackled the guy in the yard. By the time we ran downstairs, the masked man was face down in the grass, breathing hard, hands behind his back. The mask was off, and my stomach dropped. It was Travis. He looked nothing like his pictures. Older, greasier. His eyes were wild. He said nothing as the police arrived and took over. They found a small knife in his pocket. He told the officers he was just trying to see someone he cared about. He thought the mask would make it less awkward. They arrested him. We gave statements. I showed the messages, the photos, the match history. They told me he had a prior, a stalking charge that was pled down years ago. I deleted Tinder that night. I changed my Instagram to private. I got a security camera for my apartment and started sleeping with my phone under my pillow. It's been over a year. I still wake up at 3:30 sometimes. I still check the window, and I still wonder what would have happened if Mia's dad hadn't gotten there first. My name is Renee. I'm 31 now, but this happened when I was 26. At the time, I had just moved to Raleigh, North Carolina for a job in marketing. I was living alone for the first time in a small but sunny apartment, and I was finally starting to feel like my life was moving forward. I had just gotten out of a relationship, a long one, full of slow resentment and quiet disappointments. I wasn't looking for anything serious. I just wanted to feel wanted again. So I downloaded the infamous Tinder. It was mostly bad jokes, shirtless selfies, and the occasional guy holding a fish. But one night, I matched with someone who stood out. His name was Mark. I rolled my eyes at that line, but his pictures were clean-cut. Him in uniform. Him at a cookout with friends. Him holding his niece. He looked normal. Safe. Someone who followed rules. He messaged me first. "Hey beautiful. You've got that wife I'd protect with my life look." It made me laugh, even if it was a little to F much. We chatted for a few days. He was charming, but in a practiced way. Always polite, always talking about respect and loyalty. He said he worked long hours but made time for what mattered. He asked about my job, my family, my goals. He said I seemed like someone worth showing up for. We exchanged numbers and started texting. He began calling me after his shifts. Late night, sleepy conversations. He'd ask, "What are you wearing?" But not in a gross way, more like he wanted to picture me to feel connected. One night, I made the mistake of saying I was craving Thai food. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, confused, and there he was, holding a bag from my favorite Thai place. "I figured I'd surprise you," he said. He smiled like it was romantic. I smiled back, but inside I felt off. We hadn't made plans. I hadn't given him my address. I asked how he found it. He laughed. "I've got my ways." I told myself he probably reverse-searched my phone number. That it was a little creepy, but maybe just a misguided gesture. We ate together on my couch. The conversation was fine. He talked about his job, about the people he helped, about how frustrating it was when people didn't appreciate the dangers of policing. He asked me if I'd ever dated a cop before. I said no. He said, "You'll feel safer than you ever have. All I ask is you don't lie to me. That's the one thing I can't tolerate." I nodded. I didn't lie. But after he left, I double-checked the locks on my door. Over the next few weeks, he got more intense. He started texting constantly. "Good morning. Good night. Where are you?" during the day. "Who are you with?" if I didn't reply fast enough. If I didn't answer a call, he'd send 5 texts in a row. Once, when I went out with coworkers after work, he showed up at the bar. I was in the area, he said, even though it was 25 minutes from his precinct. He sat beside me like we were already together, put his hand on my thigh, leaned in too close. My coworkers noticed. When I got home that night, he called me. Said I'd embarrassed him by not introducing him as my boyfriend. I told him we hadn't defined anything. He got quiet for a second, then said, "You know I could find anyone. Anywhere. That's literally my job." I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I started pulling back. I delayed replies, claimed I had meetings, kept my location off. That Friday, he sent me a bouquet of roses. No card. Then began the online stalking. He watched every Instagram story, liked old photos, commented on things I hadn't posted in weeks. When I posted a photo at a bookshop with a friend, he messaged, "Who's the guy?" It was my cousin. I didn't reply. That night, I got a text. "I'm just trying to look out for you. Other men won't protect you like I will." I told him I needed space. He said, "You'll regret this. Good women always push away the real ones." I blocked his number, but he kept watching, kept finding ways. New numbers, DMs from burner Instagram accounts, comments on my LinkedIn. I reported it to the police. I walked into the Raleigh PD and told a desk sergeant that one of their officers had been harassing me. She asked his name. When I said it, her expression shifted, but only for a second. She said, "We'll look into it." I never heard back. A few days later, I found a note on my windshield. "You can't hide from someone who knows how to look." No signature, just a little smiley face drawn in ink. I moved a month later, changed my number, locked everything down, not risking anything. I never saw him again in person. I met Rayan on a Sunday night, which was already unusual. Most of my matches came midweek, when people were bored or lonely or avoiding work. But Rayan messaged me just after 10 p.m. on a quiet Sunday, and his first line wasn't a question or a pickup line. It was a statement. "You look like the kind of person who doesn't lie to themselves." I reread it twice before responding. "And you look like the kind of person who pays in cash and disappears." He replied, Is that a compliment or a warning? I liked the way he wrote, measured, like he thought about his words before dropping them. His profile was minimalist. 2 photos, one in front of a small bookstore, one with his hand resting on a motorcycle helmet. His bio read, "I speak softly and carry too many books." We messaged for 3 days before he asked to meet. He suggested a cafe near Brown University, a place with creaky wooden floors and chalkboard menus. We sat on a bench outside under a patio heater, sipping dark roast in mismatched mugs. He asked about my family before he asked what I did. That alone set him apart. I told him I was an early career architect, trying to find work that didn't feel like pure capitalism. He nodded like he understood. Ryan said he was between things. He'd done consulting for small businesses, had worked abroad, and was figuring out the next chapter. He said it like someone who didn't want to be pinned down. He didn't ask for my Instagram. Didn't check his phone once during our date. Walked me to my car and said, "I'd like to see you again if that's your truth." I smiled. It is. And for a while it was. We saw each other twice a week. Always in public places. He'd pick cafes with good pastries or bookstores with reading nooks. We never went to each other's homes, but that didn't feel strange at first. I lived with 2 roommates who were always around, and he said he was staying temporarily with a friend while transitioning back to the US. He spoke about time abroad in vague brushstrokes, years in Morocco, months in Patagonia, consulting work in Seoul, but never offered specifics. I should have pressed sooner. Instead, I let myself be charmed. He had a quiet intensity. He listened like he was taking notes in his head. He never interrupted. He remembered the names of my professors, the name of my cat growing up, the type of pen I liked to sketch with. He paid in cash every time. "I don't like being traceable," he said once. "It's not a paranoia thing. I just prefer analog." He never let me take his photo. Said he hated how cameras flatten people. I thought it was poetic. I was wrong. I started to notice inconsistencies. He said he didn't have social media, but I saw a notification on his phone once, Instagram. He flipped it over quickly. He said he was 34, but the way he talked about college made it sound like he should have been closer to 40. One night, we were walking near the canal, and he mentioned a sister in California. When I asked about her again a week later, he said she lived in Boston. I didn't say anything, but I started Googling, and there was nothing. No LinkedIn, no business records, no old blog posts, no mentions in alumni newsletters. He didn't exist, until I searched for the exact phrase he'd once used to describe himself, soft-spoken strategist. And there he was. But he wasn't Rayan. His name was Elias R. A different last name, one I won't repeat. There was a wedding website. His wedding. Scheduled for September. His fiancee's name was Hannah. She was a graphic designer in Boston. They were registered at West Elm. My stomach turned. I found photos. He hadn't lied about hating cameras. He was barely in any of them. But there was one. A group shot. Him with his arm around Hannah, looking off to the side like he wasn't part of it. The caption, "Rehearsal dinner vibes ring." Dated 3 weeks earlier. I didn't cry. I just sat there, phone shaking in my hand, trying to piece together what part of me had been real to him. I texted him, "Is your name even Rayan?" No reply. I waited. I texted again. "Does your fiancé know you've been on Tinder for months?" Still nothing. The next day he unmatched me. Blocked my number. Vanished. I thought about messaging Hannah. I even drafted it. Explained who I was, what had happened, attached screenshots. But I didn't send it. I didn't want to be the one to shatter her world. Or maybe I didn't want her to confirm mine had been fake. I told my roommate. She said, I never trusted him. He was too curated. She was right. He wasn't spontaneous. He was a script. A performance. Looking back, I see it all clearly. The way he avoided depth with precision. The way he complimented my mind, but never asked about my boundaries. The way he made me feel chosen without ever really being there. I don't date much now. I still have the apps, but I rarely open them. Sometimes I think about Hannah. I wonder if she suspects anything. If she married him anyway. If she knows that while she was planning their wedding, he was sitting across from me, asking about my childhood and telling me I was the kind of person who makes people want to be better. I believed it, because I wanted to. I met Amanda on a Thursday afternoon, which already made her feel like a disruption. Most of my matches happened late at night, after a long day and a glass of wine, decisions made in the haze of loneliness and muscle memory. But Amanda messaged me at 3:12 p.m., sharp and sober. Her opening line was, "You look like someone who reads nonfiction on purpose." I replied, "You say that like it's a crime." She said, "Depends on the book." I knew within 3 messages that she was clever. Not just witty, but quick. She didn't rely on emojis, didn't ask for my height, didn't quote her therapist. Her profile was sparse but elegant. A photo of her on a rooftop in a dark green coat, another holding a cocktail under string lights, and one with her arm around a dog that clearly wasn't hers. We met the next week at a wine bar on King Street. She arrived exactly at 6 p.m., wearing a loose cream sweater and black boots, hair pulled back in a way that made her cheekbones look like punctuation marks. She kissed me on the cheek before sitting down, which felt old-fashioned in a good way. From the start, our conversations had rhythm. She asked questions that didn't feel rehearsed. She remembered my answers. She laughed at the right beats. She didn't talk over me. She rarely checked her phone. "I work in product," she said. "Startup space. It's as chaotic as it sounds." "What kind of product?" "Something to do with simplifying professional networking." I know, ironic, right? She said it with a smirk, like she was already 2 steps ahead of my judgment. "It's early stage," she added. "We're still refining the deck." I didn't press. I was too taken with how easy she was to be around. That night ended with a hug I wanted to turn into a kiss but didn't, and a text 10 minutes later that said, "You're refreshing." We saw each other again that weekend. Walked through Waterfront Park, ate overpriced tacos, and sat on a bench watching couples pose for engagement photos. She asked me what I did, and I gave her the streamlined version. I worked in publishing. Mid-level editorial role. Enough to afford a 1-bedroom and too many books. She asked about my family, and I told her about my younger brother, Caleb. "He's the talented one," I said, half joking. "He runs a podcast that blew up last year. Tech, culture, interviews with CEOs. That kind of thing." She perked up. "Wait, Caleb Bennett?" I nodded, surprised. "Yeah. I've listened to a few episodes," she said. "He's great. Smart. Dry. I like that." It didn't feel strange then. Everyone in tech had heard of my brother. His show had cracked the top 50 on Apple Podcasts, and he'd been on panels at South by Southwest and Web Summit. But over the next few weeks, she brought him up again. In small ways. "Oh, I saw your brother posted something about startup funding. Do you ever talk shop with him?" I liked that guest he had last week. The AI guy who sounded like a villain from a Bond movie. "Does he ever invest in companies? Or just talk about them?" I chalked it up to curiosity. Caleb was charismatic, opinionated, and more successful than most people our age. I'd learned to expect a little interest when I mentioned him. I didn't mind. Amanda never made it feel like a competition. Until she did. It started when she asked if I'd bring her to one of Caleb's events. "He's speaking at that thing in Atlanta next month, right?" she asked one evening as we lay on my couch, her head on my chest. "Yeah, but it's mostly founders and investors." "I know," she said. "But I'm both." She laughed, like it was only half serious. I didn't answer. She added, "I just think it would be cool to meet him. I've been following his content for a while." Something about the way she said content made my skin itch. Still, I didn't say no. But I didn't say yes either. That week, she sent me an email. Not a text. An actual email. With a PDF attached. It was her startup deck. "Since you're in publishing," she wrote, "I figured you'd appreciate feedback. And maybe if you think it's solid, you could pass it along to Caleb." That was the moment the floor started to tilt. I read the deck. It was fine. Nothing revolutionary. A platform for networking in niche professional communities. Think LinkedIn, but more curated. She used words like synergy and embedded value and frictionless connection. It felt like a pitch aimed at someone with more money than time. I didn't reply that night. The next day, she followed up. "Would love your thoughts." I told her I didn't feel comfortable forwarding it to Caleb. She didn't reply for 6 hours. When she did, it was short. "Understood. Just figured you'd want to help." We didn't talk for 2 days. Then she invited me to dinner. She was warm again. Apologetic. Said she didn't mean to put me in an awkward position. Said she valued me, not just my connections. Said she really liked what we had and didn't want to mess it up. I wanted to believe her. So I did. Until Caleb called. He was laughing when I picked up. "Dude, some woman just pitched me her startup in the DM comments of my latest post. Said she was dating my brother and had your blessing." My stomach dropped. "What was her name?" I asked. There was a pause. I think it was Amanda something. Blonde. Kind of intense. Sound familiar? I didn't answer. She sent me a deck and everything, he continued. Said you'd mentioned her work and thought it aligned with my platform. Wanted to explore strategic alignment. Sounded like a robot. I hung up. I texted her. Did you reach out to Caleb behind my back? She replied instantly. I was just trying to maximize the opportunity. I thought you'd understand. You lied. You said you wouldn't. I didn't lie. I pivoted. I stared at my phone for a long time. Then I blocked her. She emailed the next day. Subject line, let's talk like adults. She said she was sorry I felt betrayed, but that in the startup world, relationships are leverage, and she assumed I'd be strategic enough to see that. She said she hadn't used me, that she genuinely liked me, that those things didn't have to be mutually exclusive. I didn't answer. 3 weeks later, she launched a Kickstarter for her product. Caleb wasn't involved. Neither was I. Her profile's still up. She changed her bio to founder. Builder. Always thinking forward. No mention of me. No photos of us. Sometimes I wonder if she ever cared at all, or if I was just a connection point. A warm-up pitch. Her way in. I tell myself it doesn't matter. But it does. Because it wasn't just the pitch. It was the way she made me feel seen. Heard. Like I mattered. Until I didn't. Until I was just the brother of someone more valuable. Since then, I've been wary. I don't name-drop Caleb anymore. I don't share as much. I stopped dating for a while. I still think about Amanda. Not because I miss her. It started with a grocery list. That's not a metaphor. I mean it literally. I found it in his kitchen drawer, tucked between expired coupons and a user manual for a toaster oven. It was a small, lined notepad page, torn at the edge. The handwriting was neat, blocky. Not mine. Not his either. The list said, oat milk, baby spinach, rye bread, blackberries, vitamin D gummies, candles, vanilla or cedar, pasta, the good kind. It was the good kind that did it. Because that's what I always said when we went shopping. Let's get the good kind. Meaning the expensive one. The one in the paper box with the name I always mispronounced. But this wasn't my list. And this wasn't my handwriting. I didn't confront him right away. That's never been my style. I collect things. I wait. I watch. I build a case. Maybe that's a flaw. Or maybe it's a skill. I haven't decided. Ellis and I had been together for 6 months. We met at a mutual friend's art opening in downtown Asheville. He was standing by a sculpture made of rusted bicycle parts and said something about entropy that made me laugh. He had that disheveled, gentle demeanor, corduroy blazer, 5 o'clock shadow, fingers stained with ink from his sketch pad. He told me he was a graphic designer. Freelance. Mostly print and branding. He lived alone in a bungalow just outside the city, surrounded by dogwoods and chipped wind chimes. He made French press coffee every morning and played jazz while cooking dinner. He read David Foster Wallace and underlined things. He had opinions about olive oil. He was, in many ways, exactly the kind of man I'd convinced myself I deserved after years of dating people who didn't know how to spell commitment, let alone practice it. And for a while it was good. He was tender, thoughtful. He remembered small things, how I liked my eggs over medium, how I took my tea, honey, no lemon, and that I always needed a sweater at restaurants because I ran cold. We eased into each other's routines like we were made to fit them. I never felt fireworks, but I felt calm. And after all the chaos I'd had before, men who disappeared, who lied, who made me feel like I was always auditioning, calm felt like love. So when I found the list, I didn't panic. I just started paying more attention. I noticed that when he said he was working late, he never texted back after 8 o'clock. That he never let me sleep over on Tuesdays. That there were long blonde hairs on his throw pillow, and I have dark curls. I noticed that he kept 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom. One was mine. The other wasn't his. I noticed that sometimes he said we about things I wasn't part of. Like, we tried that new place on Merrimon, or we went hiking at Craggy Pinnacle. I started asking gentle questions. Who's we? Oh, just my friend Kay. Kay? Yeah. She's in my typography group. Super smart. I nodded. Later that night, I checked his Instagram. He'd never posted about me, which didn't bother me until it did. I searched for Kay. Found her. Public profile. Blonde. Thin. Pretty. The kind of pretty that looks unstudied, but takes real work. She had a picture from Craggy Pinnacle. A blurry silhouette of a man next to her. Dated 2 weeks prior. The caption said, "Views in good company." I looked closer. The man was wearing a corduroy blazer. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't cry either. I just sat, because I wanted to be sure. The next morning, I went to his place with croissants. He kissed my cheek. Said, "You're sweet." I asked if he wanted to go hiking that weekend. He hesitated. "I think I've got plans Sunday." "With Kay?" I asked. There was a pause. Half a second too long. "Yeah, probably. She's going through something. Just being a friend." I nodded. He poured coffee. Jazz played. He didn't know I'd found the list. He didn't know I'd already messaged Kay. I didn't accuse him. I didn't yell. Instead, I asked Kay to meet for coffee. I told her I was working on a design project and wanted to hear her thoughts. She agreed. We met at a cafe off Broadway. She wore a red scarf and smelled like sandalwood. She was kind, articulate, and completely unaware. I asked how she knew Ellis. She smiled. "We've been seeing each other for a few months." I blinked. "Dating?" She laughed. "I mean, yeah. Pretty seriously." I nodded. She asked how I knew him. I said, "I used to date him." Past tense. She tilted her head. "Used to?" "Yeah," I said. "I recently found someone's grocery list in his drawer." She froze. I took out my phone, showed her a photo of the list. Her eyes widened. "That's my handwriting." I smiled. "I know." We sat in silence for a minute. Then she whispered, "Holy shit." We talked for an hour. Compared notes. Timelines. Messages. He told her I was an ex who still texted sometimes. He told me she was a friend. He'd been seeing both of us. Alternating nights. Repeating stories. Rehearsing routines. At one point, she said, "He made me lentil soup." I laughed. He made me lentil soup too. We both started crying, then laughing. That weird, bitter laughter that only comes when your heart is cracked and everything feels absurd. She said, "I thought he was different." I said, "Same." We decided we'd both walk away. Together. We didn't tell him. We didn't need to. We just stopped replying. Blocked his number. Vanished. A week later, he messaged me from a new number. "Hey, everything okay?" I didn't answer. He emailed me. "Miss you." I deleted it. I saw him once after that. At the farmer's market. He was buying sunflowers. Alone. He spotted me. Tried to wave. I turned away. Later, I told Kay. She said, "He messaged me too." I said, "Of course he did." Sometimes, I still think about the list. How small it was. How innocent. How something so ordinary unraveled something I thought was solid. People say the devil's in the details. But sometimes, the truth is there too. In a grocery list. In a second toothbrush. In a pause before a name. Ellis wasn't cruel. Not in the overt way. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult me. Didn't forget my birthday. He just lied. Softly. Repeatedly. And that, I've learned, is its own kind of violence. Not the kind that leaves bruises. But the kind that makes you question your memory. Your intuition. Your worth. I'm dating again. Slowly. I don't bring croissants anymore. I don't say yes to men who hesitate when they say we. And I never ignore a second toothbrush. Or a grocery list that isn't mine. The first thing Lucas said to me was, "You look like you read things that make you sad on purpose." I should have known right then. But I laughed. Because it was clever. Because it was true. Because I'd just finished reading a novel about grief and memory that left me crying in the middle of a Metro North train. Because I liked the idea of someone seeing through me with a single sentence. We met on Hinge. His profile was sparse but confident. A picture of him at a jazz bar, one at a community garden, and one where he was adjusting the strap on a camera, forehead lightly furrowed like he was in the middle of a thought. His answers were witty without trying too hard. Dating me is like listening to vinyl, warm, nostalgic, and slightly pretentious. I was intrigued. We started talking. The conversation was easy and fast-paced. He volleyed back with sharp observations and questions that made me pause before answering. He asked about my favorite album to listen to alone, my biggest fear as a child, the first book that made me feel understood. He didn't ask for my Instagram. He didn't mention sex. He didn't use emojis. It felt like a relief. Our first date was at a small cafe in Beacon, a tucked-away spot with mismatched mugs and homemade pastries. Luca wore a navy wool coat and carried a film camera slung across one shoulder. "I photograph strangers sometimes," he said. "Only when they're not looking. That's when people are the most themselves." He asked if he could take one of me. I said yes. We walked through Main Street afterward, stopping in little shops and bookstores. He held the door open. He made me laugh. He remembered everything I'd told him. When I got home, I told my roommate, "I think I met a good one." That's the worst thing about dating. How good liars are at making you believe they're not like the others. We kept seeing each other. Once a week, then every few days. He never pressured me. He always listened. He remembered the names of my co-workers and the fact that I liked my eggs medium boiled. One night, after dinner, we ended up at his place. It was a loft above a vintage furniture store, exposed brick and record shelves, and an actual rotary phone mounted on the wall. It was the kind of place that made you think, of course he lives here. We talked for hours. Music, politics, the ethics of true crime podcasts. Then he kissed me, and it was slow and careful in the way that felt earned. I felt safe. That lasted about 3 weeks. It unraveled on a Tuesday afternoon. I was at a friend's apartment, killing time before a dinner reservation. She handed me her phone and said, "You have to see this thread. Some guy's exes are outing him for running this insane dating game." I scrolled, and there he was. Luca. Not just once. Over and over. Screenshots. Stories. Photos of texts. Dozens of women, all describing the same pattern. Thoughtful conversations. Deep questions. Music recommendations. A feeling of being seen. And then, sudden disinterest. Vanishing. Finding out from someone else that they weren't the only one. But it wasn't just that. It was the system. Apparently, Luca was part of a private group chat with a few other guys. They called it the League, which already made my stomach turn. They had a spreadsheet. Each woman they dated was assigned a point value based on a set of twisted criteria. Intellectual cred, books read, cultural references. Challenge factor, how long before intimacy. Aesthetic uniqueness, how niche she looked. Emotional openness, ease of vulnerability. Each category had a 1 to 10 rating. Bonus points for women who posted about the guy after the first date. I was in it. Listed as Zara B., Beacon, New York. Scores next to my name. Notes, bookish but warm. Slow burn. Predictable playlist. Might cry if pushed. The last line, 7.9 total. Worth it. I felt like I was drowning in the middle of someone else's joke. I texted him. "You have a spreadsheet?" He read it. Didn't reply. An hour later, I got, "It's not what you think." I didn't reply. He sent another. None of it was fake. "I liked being with you. I just got carried away. Like it was a game. Like I was a level he passed. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of a scene. I didn't want to be the next screenshot. So I blocked him. But the damage was done. I'd given him things. Little pieces. Stories I didn't tell just anyone. The name of the teacher who made me believe I could write. The song that makes me cry every time I hear it. The dream I had when I was 8 that I still think about when I can't sleep." He'd asked with care. He'd listened like it mattered. And he'd written it down like data. 4 points. For praise. For ego. It took me a long time to tell anyone. I was embarrassed. Not just that I'd fallen for it, but that I'd wanted it so badly. To be seen. To be heard. To be chosen. I met Seher on a Thursday evening, which felt symbolic in hindsight. Thursdays are the edge of the week, close enough to the weekend to feel hopeful, far enough from Monday to still be naive. Her profile was understated but magnetic. A photo of her laughing into a wine glass, one on a hiking trail with wildflowers in the background, and another in a black blazer, seated at a long conference table, looking like she ran the place. Her bio read, "Building something that matters. Looking for clarity, not chaos." Our first few messages were crisp, clever, and efficient, like she had a schedule to keep but was still willing to make room for curiosity. We met for drinks at a rooftop bar in downtown Boulder. She arrived in a wool coat the color of rust, boots that looked expensive but practical, and a silver ring with a jagged blue stone on her index finger. She looked like someone who had already lived 3 lives and was halfway into a 4th. "I ordered us mezcal," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "You seem like someone who can handle it." I laughed. "You seem like someone who doesn't ask permission." She tilted her head. "Why would I?" We talked for 2 hours. She asked about my job marketing for a mid-sized outdoor gear company, my family, divorced parents, one sister in Seattle, and my ambitions to make enough money to live near mountains and not hate Mondays. She told me she was working on a startup, something to do with streamlining investor discovery for underrepresented founders. I asked what that meant. It's like a dating app, she said, but for capital. Founders meet funders. No noise. No nonsense. She didn't say much more, not that night, but she asked if I wanted to see her again. I said yes. We kept it steady. Twice a week, sometimes 3. Always her choice of venue. Coffee shops with minimal branding. Wine bars with discreet lighting. Bookstores that closed late. She was smart, but never showy. She didn't name-drop books or talk about mindfulness. She didn't post selfies or use the word manifest. But everything about her felt intentional. She never asked for help. Never seemed out of control. She carried a small leather notebook she wrote in constantly. Notes, sketches, names, numbers. When I asked what she was writing, she smiled. Just staying organized. The first time we kissed, it was raining. She pulled me into the doorway of a closed gallery, leaned in, and said, "For the record, this is not a pitch." I laughed. Noted. But something shifted after that. The next time we met, she asked what I thought of angel investing. I said I didn't know much about it. She nodded slowly. "You seem like someone who understands risk, though." I shrugged. "I guess." "Why?" She hesitated. "I usually don't bring this up early, but I'm closing a pre-seed round. It's not public yet, but I'm being strategic about who I let in." She said it like a secret, like I should be flattered. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just listened. She didn't push. But over the next few weeks, she brought it up again. Casually. Strategically. It's wild how many guys say they want to support ambitious women, but won't invest unless there's a man on the deck. Most VCs don't even read the pitch unless it's forwarded by someone they already know. I've had to get good at recognizing who's serious and who's just using the word ally like an accessory. Everything she said made sense. And maybe that's why I didn't see it coming. Because she never asked me directly. She just made me want to offer. And eventually I did. It wasn't a huge amount. $15,000. A chunk of savings I'd been sitting on for a future vacation, or maybe a car. She was grateful, but not overly. "I won't forget this," she said, tucking her hand into mine. "You'll be glad you bet on me." I believed her. For a while nothing changed. But gradually, she grew harder to reach. Texts took longer. Calls went unanswered. She canceled 2 dates in a row. Said she was deep in sprint mode. Said she'd explain soon. Then she went quiet. I waited a week. Then 2. Finally, I sent a message that just said, "Hey, hope everything's okay. Let me know if you need anything." She replied 3 days later. "Sorry. In San Francisco. Investor meetings. Been a blur. No emojis. No warmth. Just data." I didn't hear from her again. Not until I saw her on LinkedIn. A post titled, "How I Raised $400,000 in 30 Days Without a Male Co-Founder." There she was, see her A, founder and CEO of Clarity Loop. The same pitch deck. The same photo. But the caption hit harder. In a landscape full of performative support, I learned to cut through the noise and identify men who wanted access more than ego. I never dated users. I dated believers. I read it twice. 3 times. I wasn't named. But I didn't need to be. I was one of them. A believer. I clicked on the comments. Dozens of women cheering her on. Investors praising her grit. One comment said, "Love this model. Convert the male gaze into startup capital." Another, "Dating is fundraising." Iconic. I felt my stomach twist. Because I hadn't just funded her startup. I'd fallen for her structure. The persona. The controlled vulnerability. And I wasn't alone. I found a Reddit thread a week later. A guy from Denver posted, "Anyone else get low-key scammed by a founder named Seher? Matched on Hinge, dated a few weeks, invested, then ghosted." Several replies. Same story. Same strategy. They called her the Closer. A nickname that sounded half flattering, half sinister. I didn't respond. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't ask for my money back. Because technically it wasn't stolen. I'd given it. Willingly. And she'd taken it. Without lying. Without promising anything more than what she delivered. A moment. A version of intimacy. A pitch. Sometimes I wonder if she ever meant any of it. If she ever looked at me and saw more than a line on a cap table. If she ever felt anything when we kissed in the rain. But I'll never know. and I've stopped needing to. The first thing I noticed about Merrick was how still he was. Not stiff or awkward, just still, like someone who believed movement gave too much away. While other men fidgeted, scratched their beards, or checked their phones mid-conversation, he looked at you, fully and calmly, as though nothing else existed. We met on a rainy Friday in Portland, a city that always felt like it was breathing in twilight. He'd messaged me first, quoting a line from my profile. "You said you prefer silence over small talk. That's either very honest or very lonely." I replied, "Can it be both?" He said, "That's why I swiped right." He was different from the others. His photos didn't feature gym selfies or mountain peaks. Just one of him sitting by a window with a book open. Another in a kitchen, sleeves rolled, holding a coffee cup. His bio was one sentence, looking closely. We met for tea at a quiet spot in the Pearl District. He wore a black wool coat and carried a leather-bound notebook. No visible phone. No watch. Just presence. He asked questions that weren't designed to impress me, only to understand. What was your favorite hiding place as a child? What's a sound that makes you feel safe? Have you ever seen yourself through someone else's eyes and not recognized yourself? After an hour, I felt like I'd known him longer than some people I'd dated for months. He walked me to my car and said, "You're not what I expected." That's a compliment. We started seeing each other regularly. Once a week, then twice. He never pushed for intimacy. Never rushed. He brought me books instead of flowers. He cooked for me, simple meals plated like art. His apartment was in the Alphabet District, tucked above a bakery. It was spotless, mid-century furniture, soft rugs, framed black and white photographs of strangers in cities I couldn't name. He kept his phone face down. Said he didn't like interruptions. He had a drawer full of cameras. Old ones. Film. SLRs, Polaroids. "I don't do digital," he said. I found it charming. He never took my picture. Said he preferred memories to mementos. "You're not a subject," he told me once. "You're a presence." I fell for him slowly. Carefully. I told myself I was being wise this time. Then, one evening, I left my earrings on his nightstand. They were small, silver hoops my sister had given me. I realized they were missing the next morning, and asked if I could swing by after work to grab them. He hesitated. "I might be out," he said. "Can I drop them at your place instead?" That was the first time he'd declined to see me. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. So I offered, "I won't stay. Just in and out. I'll be 2 minutes." Another pause. Then, "Okay, but I'm working on something, so don't mind the mess." There was never a mess in his apartment. When I arrived, he buzzed me in. His voice over the intercom was flat. Tense. The door was unlocked. He wasn't in the living room. "Hello?" I called. "In the back," he said. I stepped inside. The air felt different. Thicker. Like it didn't want me there. I walked to the nightstand and saw my earrings, placed carefully on a dish. As I reached for them, I noticed something else. A small black object on the bookshelf, nestled between 2 novels. It looked like a charger at first, but it had a lens. I leaned in. It was a camera. Hidden. Pointed at the bed. I froze. Then I looked around. There was another one, just above the curtain rod. Another near the ceiling vent. They were discreet, but not invisible. Not once you knew what to look for. I felt my throat tighten. I walked to the kitchen. Camera above the fridge. Another near the bookshelf. I turned slowly. He was standing in the hallway watching me. "You're early," he said. I said I'd be 2 minutes. He didn't move. I pointed at the nearest lens. "What is that?" He looked at it. "A camera. You're recording me?" "I record everything." "Since when?" "Always." I stepped back. "You said you didn't do digital." "I didn't say I didn't document." "Were you recording me when we were?" "Yes." There was no shame in his voice. No apology. Just fact. "I didn't consent to that," I said. "You did not consent either." My skin went cold. "That's not how this works." He stepped forward. "You don't understand. I'm preserving connection. Capturing what's real before it collapses under memory. You think that justifies filming someone without telling them? I think it's the only way to hold on to truth." I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just left. He didn't follow. He didn't call. He didn't text. But 2 days later, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a flash drive. I didn't plug it in. I never will. I filed a report. The police said without proof of intent or distribution, it would be a difficult case. I contacted a lawyer. She said unless I found myself on a website, I couldn't press charges. I changed my locks, deleted my apps, told 3 friends. 2 said I should have seen it coming. 1 said she met him once, said he gave her the creeps. I've never seen him again. But sometimes, I wonder how many others were recorded. How many women stood in his apartment, not knowing they were being turned into footage. How many thought they'd found something real. And how many still don't know. Now, when I go on dates, I look for small lenses, microphones, inconsistencies. It was raining the first time I met David in person. Not unusual for Seattle, but something about it made the night feel cinematic, like we were walking into a scene that had already been written. We'd been texting for a week after matching on Hinge. His opening line was, "You look like someone who alphabetizes their spices but still eats ice cream from the tub." He wasn't wrong. David had that rare texting ability. Funny without trying too hard, responsive without being clingy, deep without sounding like he was quoting a therapist. He said he was a product manager at a health tech startup, recently relocated from Chicago, and still figuring out which coffee shops are worth a second visit. We met at one of the places I recommended, dark wood, good lattes, and a corner table that felt like it had secrets. He walked in wearing a navy jacket and glasses that made him look like he read The New Yorker without being obnoxious about it. He smiled when he saw me and said, "You're even better in 3D. I laughed. "You too." The date went well. Exceptionally well, actually. We talked about family, careers, the weirdness of dating apps. He told me his last relationship ended 2 years ago after a slow fade that felt like a mutual ghosting. I told him mine ended when my ex decided he wanted to find himself in Bali, which apparently didn't include me. David asked thoughtful questions. He remembered my dog's name. He didn't check his phone once. We left the cafe at closing time, and he walked me to my car. He didn't try to kiss me, which I liked. He just said, "Let's do this again." And we did. Twice a week turned into more. I started leaving a toothbrush at his place. He cooked me dinner, played me old records, and made me laugh in that quiet way, the kind that hits later, when you're brushing your teeth and realize you're smiling for no reason. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't over the top. But he felt solid, grounded, like someone who'd thought about love, not just flirted with the idea. One night, we were lying on his couch, legs tangled, and I asked, "Are you seeing anyone else?" He paused. Not long. Just long enough. "No," he said. "Not seriously." I raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" He kissed my forehead. "It means I was talking to a few people before you, but you're the only one I'm seeing now." I believed him. Mostly. But I started noticing small things. He'd get texts late at night and turn his phone face down. He never posted anything on social media, not even landscapes or food shots. His accounts were sparse, barely used. He'd disappear for hours on weekends. Said he was running errands or catching up on work. But when I asked what he was working on, his answers were vague. Then came the text. We were in his kitchen, making pancakes, when his phone buzzed with a notification that lit up the screen before he could grab it. It said, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about your hands. Lauren." I froze. He saw my face before he saw the phone. "What?" he asked. I pointed. "Who's Lauren?" He glanced. "Oh, that's someone I used to talk to." "Used to? It's not what you think." He picked up the phone, typed something quickly, and locked it. "I'll handle it." "Handle what?" "She's just someone I was messaging before you." I told her I've moved on. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "You told me you weren't seeing anyone else." "I'm not. Not seriously." There was again that phrase. I left early that morning. I didn't hear from him for 2 days. When he finally reached out, it was to talk things through. We met at his place. He made tea, sat across from me, looked earnest. "I want to be honest," he said. "I was talking to a few people when we met. I didn't expect to like you this much, this fast." I didn't interrupt. "I didn't sleep with anyone else after our 3rd date. That's my line." "Your line?" "My rule. 3 dates in, I stop seeing others. I focus." I blinked. "You have rules for this?" He nodded. "I call it my dating draft." I stared at him. "Like fantasy football?" I asked. He flinched. "Not exactly. It's just, dating is overwhelming. You meet people in parallel. It's hard to know who's real until you test the field." "Test the field?" "I know how it sounds." "No," I said. "I don't think you do." He sighed. It's not about playing games. It's about making sure. Making sure of what? That I choose the person who fits best. Fits best, I repeated. Like a jacket? He didn't answer. I stood up. You made me feel like I was the only one. You curated everything to feel intimate and intentional. Meanwhile, I was in a lineup. You were the front runner, he said quietly. I stared at him. Do you hear yourself? He reached for my hand. Monica, I'm choosing you. I pulled away. I'm not a draft pick, David. I'm not waiting to be selected. I left. He didn't follow. He texted a week later. I understand if you're done, but I want you to know it was real for me. I didn't reply. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I finally understood something. He wasn't malicious. He was methodical. He didn't lie outright. He omitted, deferred, controlled. He thought love was about strategy, but love isn't earned by narrowing down a list. It's built by presence, by risk, by not treating people like options. I deleted his number. I told my friends. One of them said, he sounds like a walking spreadsheet. Another said, at least he was honest in the end. But honesty delayed is still deception. Now, when I meet someone new, I ask different questions. I met Natalie on a Tuesday. I remember because she messaged first, which rarely happened, and because her opening line was, "You look like someone who overthinks breakfast." Guilty. Her profile was a mix of contradictions, photos in hiking boots and high heels, a quote from Sontag, and a caption under a concert selfie that read, "Don't ask me the band. I was there for the chaos." We met for drinks at a speakeasy behind a bookstore in River North. She wore a navy trench coat and smelled like ginger and citrus. She ordered mezcal and asked me questions that skipped the surface. What's the worst lie you've ever told in a relationship? What part of you do people love before they actually know you? Have you ever weaponized your sadness to get someone to stay? I answered all of them. Honestly, I think. I told her I'd once said, "I love you," because I didn't know how else to keep someone from leaving. She nodded like she'd heard that before. After 2 drinks, she looked at me over the rim of her glass and said, "You're more open than I expected. You're more intense than I expected." She smiled. "You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not. It's just rare." She leaned in, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath. Rare things should be studied. We left together. Back at my place, she moved like someone used to being watched, but not in a performative way, in a precise, observational way. She took in my books, my record player, the half-finished whiskey on my desk. She asked about the Polaroid on my fridge of my sister and me at the lake. Is she older or younger? Older. By 5 years. She looks like someone who'd break your heart if she weren't your sister. I laughed. She used to punch me in the arm until I cried. She kissed me before I could say anything else. It wasn't hesitant. It wasn't exploratory. It was decisive. We didn't make it to the bedroom. The couch was good enough. Her hands were quick, deliberate. She didn't ask for permission with every touch, but she read my body like she was decoding it. That was the first time I noticed it, that strange blend of intimacy and detachment. It was hot, but clinical. Afterward, she lay with her head on my chest. We didn't speak for several minutes. Then she asked, "Do you think people can be honest in bed?" I paused. "Sometimes. Maybe more than anywhere else." She nodded and said, "That's where the real tells are." I thought she meant it metaphorically. I was wrong. We kept seeing each other, always on her terms. She never stayed over. She never invited me to her place. She didn't talk about her job beyond consulting. She didn't post on social media. She didn't introduce me to friends. But she listened. Closely. She remembered everything I said. The name of my childhood dog. The time my mom left for 6 months and came back like nothing had happened. The way I flinch at sirens. I took it as a sign of connection. She took it as data. It unraveled on a Thursday. We were at my place, drinking wine on the floor because I'd sold my couch to get a new one that hadn't arrived yet. She was sitting cross-legged in a sweatshirt I'd lent her, laughing at one of my college stories, when her phone buzzed. She ignored it, but I saw the name flash on the screen. Camila. The name meant nothing to me, but the preview did. Got the audio. He talks about her around 28:15. We'll transcribe by tomorrow. I froze. Natalie didn't notice. She was still sipping her wine. I picked up her phone. "Who's Camila?" She looked up, still calm, but something shifted in her eyes. "She's a friend." I held up the screen. "What audio? What's being transcribed?" She set down her glass. "Okay, Julian. Listen. Who are you? I'm Natalie. No, you're not. What is this? She stood. Didn't run. Didn't panic. I was hired, she said, by someone who wanted to know if you were still in contact with someone named Alana. The name hit me like a slap. Alana was my ex. The one who'd left after a year of emotional whiplash and late-night fights. The one who'd accused me of hiding things. Of keeping secrets in my mouth like glass. We hadn't spoken in 9 months. You're a what, PI? Not officially, but I do research. Background collection. Relationship verifications. I stared at her. You mean you date people for information? Not always. This was specific. My voice cracked. You slept with me. She looked almost tired. I needed access. And context. You used me. I observed you. I laughed sharp, bitter. You were a plant. She didn't deny it. She paid you. Yes. To find out if I still talked to her. She suspected you were lying. She wanted to know if your pattern had changed. If you were still emotionally manipulative. I sat down. And Natalie, if that was even her name, looked at me with something almost like sympathy. You're not manipulative. You're just lonely. But you talk about her like she's still a mirror. So what now? I leave. This is the part where you never see me again. Do I get a copy of the report? She almost smiled. You're not the client. She left without taking the sweatshirt. I didn't move for an hour. Later that night, I found a flash drive in my jacket pocket. No note. No label. I haven't opened it, because I already know what's on it. My voice. My confessions. My body, maybe. My tells. She said she wasn't always a plant. Maybe she still isn't. But I was just soil. Now I question everything. Every touch. Every kiss. Every time she said, tell me more. I thought I was falling. Turns out I was leaking. And someone was writing it all down. I met Jared at a cider tasting in the Pearl District, a warehouse-turned-bar where couples in hiking boots sniffed fermenting apples like sommeliers. He was standing alone near the chalkboard menu, squinting at the tap list like it held a secret. I recommend the elderberry, I said, just loud enough for him to hear. He turned, smiled like he'd been waiting for someone to interrupt his thoughts. You sound like someone who's been here before. Twice. Once for a date. Once to recover from a date. He laughed. Hopefully this one's neutral territory. We ended up talking for an hour, then walking down the block to a bookstore, then sitting on a bench sharing a vegan donut, like we'd known each other longer than an hour and 15 minutes. He was charming in the way that makes you feel like you're clever for noticing he's charming. Tall, clean-shaven, a little awkward in his gestures, but deeply observant in a way that felt rare. When I told him I worked in community arts programming, he asked questions that weren't just polite, they were precise. He told me he was a data analyst for a tech startup that helped nonprofits optimize fundraising strategies. I help people, he said. I gave him my number. That night, he texted. Made it home. Still tasting elderberry. Still thinking about your laugh. By the end of the week, we'd had dinner twice and a long, meandering walk through Forest Park, where he told me about his childhood move from Ohio and how he hated cities until he found one with trees in the middle of it. He kissed me in the middle of a footbridge. It was the kind of kiss that feels like you're being read rather than touched. I let myself fall. Jared was attentive, gentle, always asking how I was, always offering to help. If I mentioned being tired, he'd show up with matcha. If I said I was stressed, he'd send me breathwork apps and playlists with titles like For Quiet Minds. And he listened. Every detail I gave him, my favorite author, my dog's name, how I'd once locked myself out of my apartment wearing only a towel, he remembered. He made me feel known. Until he made me feel watched. It started small. One night, I mentioned I was going to my friend Mara's house. I didn't say where she lived, just that she was hosting a low-key dinner. The next day, Jared said, "Hope the dinner off Alberta was fun." I paused. "I didn't tell you where it was." He smiled. "You mentioned Mara lives near that vegan bakery." I connected the dots. I let it go. Then he started finishing sentences I hadn't started. "You probably ordered the turmeric latte again, right? You always go for that when you're feeling foggy." Or, "You haven't posted today, but I figured you'd be at the museum. They're doing that fiber art exhibit you bookmarked 2 weeks ago." Or, "You seemed kind of off around noon. I'm guessing your meeting with your director didn't go well." I joked once, "You spying on me?" He didn't laugh. Instead, he said, "I just pay attention." Still, I brushed it off. I'd dated men who were emotionally absent, self-involved, allergic to investment. Jared was the opposite. He showed up. He cared. That had to count for something. Then came the dog park incident. I was walking Luna, my rescue mutt, when I ran into an old friend from college. We chatted for about 10 minutes. Just catching up. No big deal. That night, Jared asked, "So who was the guy in the green jacket?" I blinked. "What?" "At the dog park. You were with some guy. Tall, dark hair, glasses. You came by?" "No, but I saw you on my way back from the gym. Just for a second. It felt like a lie, but a small one. Still, my skin prickled." A few days later, I was on the phone with Mara, venting about a work conflict. I said, "I just feel like Jared knows too much. Like he's always half a step ahead of me." She hesitated. "What do you mean?" I told her about the thing with the dog park. About the way he always seemed to know where I was, what I was doing, even what I was feeling. She asked, "Have you checked your phone?" I laughed. "For what? Location sharing? Or anything weird?" That night I checked. In my settings under Find My, Jared was listed. Not just with my phone, but with always access. I hadn't shared that. I asked him about it the next day. He didn't deny it. "I just guessed your password," he said, like it was no big deal. "You left your phone unlocked one day. I was worried about you. You seemed scattered. You tracked me. I checked in. You violated my privacy. I wanted to understand you better." I stood there, heart pounding, realizing I'd let someone in who believed care meant control. "I told you everything willingly," I said. "I know," he said. "But sometimes people don't know what they need until someone else provides the framework." I left. He called. Multiple times. Texted. "I'm not a bad guy. I just loved you in real time. Don't throw this away because you're scared of being seen. You said you wanted someone who paid attention." I blocked him. Then I changed my passwords, reset my phone, deleted half the apps I hadn't even remembered downloading. I felt like I'd been hacked, not by malware but by intimacy. Now when someone says they're just curious, I ask what they'll do with the answers. Because love isn't surveillance. And care without consent is just control in costume. I used to think memory was solid, that the past was a shared place two people could walk through together, like a park or a museum. You'd point to a moment and the other person would say, "Yes, I remember that too." That was before Ben. We met at a rooftop screening of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I know, ironic in hindsight. It was one of those summer nights where the air feels more like suggestion than temperature, and strangers feel like possibilities. He was standing near the snack table, debating whether kettle corn counted as real food, and I said, "It's technically a vegetable if you trace it back to corn." He laughed. "Then I'm practically vegan." His name was Ben. He worked in media production, mostly branded content, but with taste, he clarified. He had that charming humility some men wear like a second skin, self-deprecating jokes, a habit of quoting obscure documentaries, and a backpack that looked like it had been through several international airports. We sat together during the movie, and when Clementine said, "I'm just a fucked up girl who's looking for my own peace of mind," he whispered, "Honestly, same." I didn't know then that he was already editing the narrative. We started dating the next week. It was quick, but not rushed. He texted every morning, sent me links to articles he thought I'd like, made playlists with titles like Maya at Midnight and For When You Can't Sleep. He said things like, "You're the kind of smart that makes me nervous," and "I've never met someone who feels like a memory before they're even gone." I thought it was poetry, but it was preamble. The first time something felt off was during a brunch with his friends. We were at a cafe in Cambridge, the kind with mismatched mugs and a chalkboard menu. One of his friends asked how we met, and Ben said, "We matched on Bumble." She messaged first. I blinked. "No, we didn't. We met at that rooftop movie." He smiled. "Right, I meant that's how it usually goes. But yeah, film screening. That was it." It felt small, harmless, but it wasn't the last time. A week later, I brought up a conversation we'd had about our favorite childhood shows. He said, "I don't think we've talked about that." I reminded him. I'd said I used to pretend to be Sailor Mars. He'd said he was more of a Darkwing Duck kid. He shrugged. Must have been someone else. I laughed, but my stomach tightened. Another time, I quoted something he'd told me, about his dad being a jazz drummer who left when he was 10. He looked confused. "I never said that." "You did. We were walking through the park. You said you still flinch when you hear brushes on a snare. He shook his head. I'm close with my dad. He's an accountant. I stared at him. Are you messing with me? He laughed. You have such a vivid imagination. That line became his refrain. Any time I remembered something he didn't, or said he'd done something he swore he hadn't, he'd tell me I was mixing things up. You're probably blending me with someone else, he said once, when I mentioned the time he brought me soup while I had the flu. I've never brought anyone soup. But he had. I remembered the thermos. The note on a sticky tab that said, "Even immortals get colds." Still, I doubted myself. I started writing things down. Dates. Quotes. Little details. I kept them in my phone under a folder marked "Ben confirmed." But even that didn't help. Because sometimes he'd say things that sounded exactly like what I'd written, but claim they were brand new. Or he'd reference a moment I hadn't documented and say, "See? I remember everything." It made me question not just my memory, but my mind. I brought it up carefully one night. Do you ever feel like we're living two different versions of this relationship? He kissed my forehead. You're just anxious. Maybe. But sometimes it feels like you're erasing things. I'd never do that. But he did. Constantly. He told our friends I was the one who asked him out. That I'd said, "I love you" first. That I once told him I hated his work, which I never did. I started avoiding social events. I didn't want to hear who I was in his version of the story. The final break came on a Tuesday. We were at his place. I found an old notebook in his kitchen drawer. It had a list titled "Scenes That Work." Underneath were bullet points. She cries in the rain. She forgets what she already told me. She thinks I'm the only one who sees her. She doubts herself, then clings harder. I dropped the notebook. When he came back into the room, I held it up. He didn't flinch. You went through my stuff? What is this? He shrugged. It's for a project. I stared. You mean me? He looked at me like I was overreacting. You're not the only muse I've ever had. I left. Blocked his number. Deleted the playlists. Burned the sticky note. But the worst part wasn't leaving. It was not knowing what was real. I should have known from the moment Maria walked into the bar and ordered a mezcal sour with no egg white, 2 cherries, that I was out of my depth. She had this ease, like someone who'd been in 100 places just like this and never once needed to look at a menu. Her laugh was warm, her dress was red, and her earrings looked like they could double as weapons if she needed them to. We met through a friend of a friend at a trivia night in Capitol Hill. She joined our team late, said she'd just gotten out of a bad date, and asked if we needed help with obscure 90s pop. We did. She nailed 4 questions in a row and bought us a round of drinks with an apologetic smile. I always feel bad when I show off, she said, but I can't help it if I'm good at remembering useless things. Afterward, she asked if I wanted to share a lift. We talked the whole ride. She smelled like citrus and expensive moisturizer. She said she'd just moved back to Denver after a few years on the West Coast. I miss the mountains, she said. And the people here don't pretend to be spiritual just because they bought a plant. I gave her my number. She texted the next morning. Coffee? I promise I won't quiz you. We met that afternoon. She was magnetic. The kind of person who made you feel like you were the only one in the room. She asked questions that felt flattering, not forced. She touched my arm when she laughed. She complimented my shoes. When I offered to pay, she said, "Let me get the tip. It's only fair." It was always like that. Only fair. She never asked for much. A few dollars for a coffee she forgot to Venmo. An Uber she said she'd split later. A parking meter she'd definitely get next time. It was nothing really. Small things. And she gave back in other ways. She showed up in my life like sunlight, texts at noon that said "thinking of you." Surprise cookies left at my door, playlists labeled "for you probably." She paid for brunch once when I forgot my wallet. She slipped a book into my bag with a note in the margin. Chapter 6 feels like us. So when she asked if she could borrow $60 for a last-minute pet deposit, my landlord's being a nightmare, I didn't hesitate. She Venmo'd me back 2 days later. Trust, after all, is built on patterns. The next ask was for $120. She said her card got flagged while booking a flight to see her aunt in Albuquerque. She showed me the confirmation page. Told me she'd pay me back the next day. She did. Then it was $200. Her car wouldn't start. She needed a tow. Then $75. A prescription she hadn't budgeted for. Then $30. She left her wallet in a lift. Each time, she had a reason. Each time, she thanked me with something: homemade banana bread, a handwritten note, a back rub that turned into a night where we didn't get much sleep. I told myself it was fine. I was fine. She was just going through a rough patch. We all hit them. But the requests didn't stop. They just got smaller. $15 here. $40 there. An overdraft she hadn't expected. A late fee on a bill. A concert ticket she swore she'd reimburse. It felt petty to say no. It felt cruel to ask again. And then one night we were at my place, lying on the couch after watching a terrible indie film she insisted was underrated. And I asked, "Hey, just curious, how's your job going?" She looked at me like I'd spilled wine on the rug. "Why?" "Just haven't heard much about it lately." She paused. "It's fine. I'm still doing social strategy for that wellness startup." She kissed me before I could ask more. But something was off. Later that week, I checked her LinkedIn. The startup hadn't posted anything in months. Her name wasn't listed on their site. I found a Reddit thread speculating the company had folded. I asked her again. She deflected. Then she ghosted me for 3 days. When she finally came back, she said her phone had been acting weird. She sent a selfie of her dog as proof of life. I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. So I Googled her name and found a post on a local forum titled, "Beware, Maria S. and the Slow Burn Scam." It was long, detailed, written by a guy who said he dated her last year. Said she borrowed small amounts of money over 3 months and never paid him back. Said she used charm like a shield. Said she always had a story. I messaged him. He replied within the hour. "Same person," he said. "Same script." I felt sick. I checked my Venmo history, added it up. Over $900. In just 6 weeks. That night, I texted her. "I know what this is. Don't contact me again." She didn't reply. The next day, she blocked me on everything. I don't know if she ever really liked me. I don't know if the banana bread was actually homemade. I met Chris during a week when I was trying to quit dating apps. I had deleted Hinge the night before, told myself I needed space, silence, time to figure out who I was when I wasn't performing availability. And then I saw him in the used bookstore near my apartment in Fort Greene. He was in the psychology section, thumbing through a worn copy of Attachment in Psychotherapy. That should have been a red flag. Instead, it felt like fate. He had wireframe glasses, a soft jawline, and wore a button-down shirt that looked like it had been ironed by someone who cared. I noticed the way he scanned the page, eyes slow, deliberate, like he was absorbing rather than just glancing. He looked up, caught me staring, and smiled. "You ever read this one?" he asked, holding up the book. "I've skimmed it," I said. "Back when I thought I could date a therapist and not spiral." He laughed. "Dangerous move. I like to live on the edge." He offered his hand. "Chris." "Elena." We made small talk about the books we were pretending to look at. He told me he was working on his licensure, had finished his MSW, and was now doing clinical hours at a nonprofit in Crown Heights. I told him I was a designer, mostly freelance, mostly stressed. He didn't ask for my number. He asked if I wanted to get tea. Right then. No pressure. No performance. I said yes. We walked to a nearby cafe, sat in a corner booth, and talked for 2 hours. He asked me open-ended questions about my childhood, my last relationship, what I was afraid of when I was alone. He didn't make it feel like therapy. He made it feel like intimacy. By the end of the week, we'd gone out twice more. By the end of the second week, he was in my apartment, tracing his fingers down the slope of my spine like he was reading a language only he understood. He was slow, attentive. He asked for consent with his eyes more than his words. When we slept together, he didn't rush to finish or disappear into silence afterward. He held me like I was breakable, but worth rebuilding. "You feel everything too much," he whispered once, pressing his lips against my shoulder. "That's why you're always tired." I'd never told anyone that. But he was right. He was always right. Over the next month, Chris became a kind of ritual. Friday night dinners. Sunday morning walks. Late night talks where he'd hold my hand while I cried about things I hadn't even known were still buried. He made me feel seen. Not just looked at, seen. He remembered everything. The name of my high school best friend. The fact that I always slept with socks on. The time I said I hated being called babe because it made me feel like a placeholder. He never called me anything I didn't like. He never raised his voice. He never pushed. But he always asked questions. Deep ones. Invasive but wrapped in warmth. What's something you've never told anyone? What's your worst recurring thought? What's the thing you secretly believe about yourself that you hope no one else ever confirms? I answered every one. I felt safe with him, even when I didn't understand why. Then one night it shifted. We were in his apartment, which was quieter than mine, more curated. Books arranged by color. A candle that smelled like cedar and resolve. We just had sex, long and slow, the kind that makes it hard to stand afterward. I was lying on his chest, tracing the freckles on his neck, when he said, "You ever wonder if you're drawn to pain?" I blinked. "What do you mean? You're always telling stories where you're the one who gets hurt. But maybe that's how you know you're alive." I sat up. "Is this a new therapy angle?" He shook his head. "Just an observation. You collect your own suffering like souvenirs." I laughed, but it felt sharp. "Okay, bit harsh." He shrugged. "You told me you wanted honesty. I let it go. But the next time we were together, he said something similar. This time it was, 'You're addicted to being misunderstood.' The time after that, 'You don't want love. You want redemption.' It stopped sounding like insight. It started sounding like knives. But he always followed it with softness. With sex. With forehead kisses and, 'I'm just trying to help you see yourself clearly.' And I believed him. Until the day I got a message from a woman named Priya. It came through Instagram. I didn't recognize her. But the message read, 'I know this is weird, but I think we've both been seeing Chris. Can we talk?' My stomach dropped. I replied, 'We talked.' She'd met him 3 months before me. Same bookstore. Same questions. Same slow unraveling. He told me I had unresolved family trauma, she said. Then he slept with me the same night. She sent screenshots. His texts. His selfies. A voice memo that sounded exactly like the ones he sent me. I confronted him. He didn't deny it. 'I never told you we were exclusive. You told me I was safe.' 'You were.' 'I never lied. You manipulated me.' He sighed. 'I helped you open up. That's not manipulation. That's connection.' 'No,' I said. 'That's harvesting.' He looked at me like I'd disappointed him. Like I was failing a test I didn't know I was taking. 'You're projecting,' he said. I left. I cried for 3 days. Then I started looking. I found more women. A Reddit thread. A Medium post. A private Facebook group. All with the same story. Chris, the armchair therapist. Chris, the empath. Chris, the collector of pain. He wasn't licensed. He wasn't doing clinical hours. He was never enrolled in the MSW program he mentioned. He was just someone who learned how to mirror vulnerability, who turned empathy into a tool, who made women feel chosen, so he could be the one doing the choosing. Now, when I talk about what happened, people ask why I didn't see it sooner. But that's the thing about emotional cons. They don't steal your money. They steal your reflection. They make you think it's your idea to unravel. I still sleep with socks on. I still don't like being called babe. But now, when someone asks, "What's something you've never told anyone?" I ask, "Why do you want to know?" Because some people ask to hold your heart. And some people ask to measure how it breaks. I met Kevin on a dog beach in Ocean Beach, which sounds like something out of a rom-com, and for the first few weeks, it felt like one. He had a lab mix named Archie who bounded up to my golden retriever, Miso, and started doing that weird dog butt wiggle thing that always looks like joy in motion. Kevin followed a few seconds later, wearing a Padres cap and aviators. He had a dimpled grin and said, "Sorry, Archie believes all golden retrievers are his people." I laughed. Miso's an equal opportunity flirt, so it works. We walked together for the next 30 minutes, our dogs tangling their leashes like they were conspiring. We talked about our favorite taco shops, our mutual hatred of paddleboards, and how we both pretended not to like reality TV, while secretly knowing every contestant on Love is Blind. He asked if I wanted to grab coffee the next day. I said yes. Date 1 turned into date 5 quickly. Kevin was the kind of guy who texted good morning without sounding clingy, took candid photos of me when I laughed, and remembered my coffee order by our second outing. But he also talked about his ex. A lot. Her name was Lily. She was the first person who ever really understood me, he said over sushi one night. But she didn't know how to stay. Another time, Lily used to hate this song, but then she'd play it on repeat. She was always contradicting herself. And another, God, this place reminds me of her. We used to come here during rough patches. I guess that's why it's kind of comforting. At first, I chalked it up to lingering heartbreak. We've all been there. But then he started doing these little things. Subtle, intentional things. He'd take a photo of me mid-laugh and say, "Wow, Lily used to do that exact same smile." He'd compliment my outfits, then casually mention, Lily had this jacket she wore all the time. Yours looks better, though. The comparisons started to stack. One night, we were cooking dinner at his place. While I was cooking, he was taste testing, and he asked if I'd ever be up for going to this wine bar in North Park. I said sure. An hour later, as we walked in, he looked around like he was scanning. Funny, he said. This is where Lily and I had our last fight. I stopped mid-step. You brought me here on purpose? He shrugged. Just wanted to see how it felt. I didn't say anything, but something in my chest tightened. The next morning, I found a sticky note on his bathroom mirror. It wasn't mine. It said, "Don't forget, her birthday's next week. Be kind. L." I stared at it until my coffee went cold. When he came out of the shower, I held it up. "Want to explain this?" He glanced at it and said, "Oh, that's old. I haven't taken it down. It's from this week." He paused. "Okay, Lily and I still talk sometimes. She's going through stuff. Are you still in love with her?" He didn't answer right away. "She broke me," he said finally. "You're helping me believe again." But I wasn't sure if I was a person or a tool. A few days later, it all made sense. He invited me to a friend's rooftop party. I dressed up, white top, high-waisted jeans, the kind of outfit that says effortless, but takes 45 minutes to assemble. When we walked in, I felt it immediately. Eyes on us. Then I saw her. Lily. She was standing across the rooftop, drink in hand, wearing the exact same jacket Kevin once said we both owned. He leaned into me and whispered, "Just be cool." "Did you know she'd be here?" He didn't answer, but his hand tightened around mine. We mingled, or rather, we played a part. He introduced me to people like I was the new feature on his life's timeline. He touched my back often, kissed my temple more than usual, and every few minutes, he glanced at her. Eventually, she came over. She was polite. Too polite. "Hi, I'm Lily." I smiled. "Jess." Kevin said nothing. She looked at me for a long second, then at him. "Nice to see you making new memories here." Then she walked away. I turned to him. "Did you bring me here to make her jealous?" He sighed. "It's not that simple." "It kind of is. She's the one who left. I just needed her to see what she walked away from. And I'm what proof you're desirable." He didn't deny it. I left that night without waiting for him to walk me to the car. He texted the next morning. "I messed up, but it doesn't mean I don't care." I didn't reply. A week passed. Then two. He showed up at my apartment unannounced. I didn't let him in. He stood there with flowers and said, "You were never just a tactic. You're the first person who made me feel like I could win again." I looked at him through the screen door. "Maybe that's the problem," I said. "You turned love into a game." He didn't argue. He left the flowers. I threw them out.